In a world different from the one we know, an avatar is created of the male gender and of the human race. In addition to having a very peculiar job, that of a priest, the name of this player is Ryu, who from now on will begin his life in Theo. A few seconds after creating the avatar, the boy is teleported to a city, becoming truly excited by the vastness of the place. To get to that point, we must go back a bit in time to when this boy received the game Theo as a birthday present. Despite that, Shinjiryu didn't want to accept the gift because he was already in high school. But his friends, Chiyohara Taiyu and Chiyohara L, made it clear that they were only doing this so they could play together. Kyo is a fantasy-era game and one of the most popular VRMMO in the world at the moment. Ryu, for his part, thought it would just be one of those typical medieval RPGs. However, the number of details in the place is truly insane, as if he had been transported to a different world. While the boy is impressed, the girl finds it funny that he gets so excited about something like that. And when the protagonist realizes it turns out to be his friend Io and his partner Taiyu, who used the codenames Ein, Sapphire, and Apollo. However, despite no one using their real names in games, Ryu was one of the weird ones who did. In any case, Apollo states that he will teach the basics of the game, and the girl says that their friend will learn from other players. But unexpectedly, the protagonist apologizes because he is determined to play alone. In the end, Apollo had forgotten about the boy's difficulty in cooperating with others, as in the past, he even refused to play three-legged races. Thus, the friends say they will help at any time, that they can meet again once Ryu gets used to things. With the farewell done, besides getting familiar with the character's controls, Hiro believes it will be good to take a small walk around the city. However, suddenly, he passes by a strange house that makes a scary noise. Therefore, faced with this, the protagonist thinks it's an event related to the tutorial. And since the sound comes from inside the shop, he begins to enter, politely asking for permission, until he finds something like a monster lying face down on a table. The person, who is a girl, is deeply offended by this and explains that she's just upset because she can't get any customers. To Ryu, this woman is strange, but maybe it's a necessary tutorial for the story's progression. So with a charismatic smile, he says he's a priest and offers to help with whatever is bothering her. Then the girl admits that Ryu seems quite nice since it's the first time someone has stayed that long in the shop. However, despite acting naturally, the protagonist was only doing this because he thought it was some kind of story scene. Regardless, not knowing this, the girl asks if she can make a request. And so the true story begins. Even though she wanted to attract customers, the girl had few materials, so she needed the boy for a hunt. And, obviously, since it involved monsters in the beginner field of the arid jungle, he'll be appropriately rewarded. This is Ryu's first quest in this world and will also be his first battle. Without having to wait long, a group of black wolves appears. The necessary materials can be gathered from all of them, which is quite similar to reality. In this case, the protagonist charges forward, excited by the thought that battles must also be equally fun. Unexpectedly, even as a beginner, the boy manages to humiliate the wolves, treating the disadvantage as if it were nothing. Until shortly after, the protagonist sits atop a pile of defeated monsters to check his rewards. So far, the boy has defeated about 30 to 40 of them, including the ones that ran toward him later. And he has already gathered most of the materials, but the item Black Wolf Fang, which isn't even rare, still hasn't been obtained. Because of this, Ryu believes he may have confused something, but doesn't know what the problem is. However, within a few seconds, an idea comes to clarify things. Until now, the boy has been defeating the monsters by aiming at their heads to destroy them as quickly as possible. Therefore, it's possible that the Fang is being destroyed every time he defeats them, which again is very similar to the real world. With this theory in mind, another wolf approaches to attack the boy, but this time he dodges and locks in a rear-naked choke on the monster. He squeezes with his arms until the wolf's health bar reaches 0, triggering the system rewards. Unfortunately, this time the theory is proven as the boy finally gets the item he needs. Ryu truly wasn't expecting that the way monsters are defeated would also be realistic. Therefore, now that he knows the right method, the boy gets excited knowing that the monsters will no longer have a chance. From a distance, some people start to get scared because the player who is eliminating all the monsters is a priest. And in theory, a priest usually stays in the rear to support other players. That's why the image of the hero in the middle of so many monsters is terrifying, like a true berserk. After much fighting, the protagonist gains the martial arts skill. Even after acquiring the necessary amount of materials, he had so much fun that he continued hunting for another 2 hours, which increased his level. Therefore, he now believes he should return to the city and visit the materials shop. However, suddenly Ryu falls to his knees, unable to move his avatar anymore. That's because his satiety level reached the minimum limit from not having eaten anything until now, which is quite inconvenient. But the boy is not alone in this because suddenly a girl appears at the scene. And noticing the protagonist's complicated situation, she approaches and asks if he's okay. At first, the hero wonders, who is this girl? However, Iswin informs her that his avatar suddenly stopped moving and that his satiety level seems to be the problem. If that's the case, the girl believes she can help and quickly begins to search for something in her bag until she hands him a rice ball to satisfy his hunger. To the hero, the situation of the girl saving him with an onigiri is practically like an angel blessing him. The name of this girl is Ashes and her main job is production, gaining experience when she produces something like a rice ball, which is quite convenient. Ryu, for his part, starts eating like someone starving. So the girl laughs and says she still has plenty more if he needs, which moves the hero, because besides being beautiful, Ashes is kind like a true goddess. In any case, later on his satiety level is recovered, and Ryu thanks her for the meal because he would have been caught by monsters if he had stayed there. Additionally, the hero bows and says he will never forget this favor and asks to express his gratitude. Ashes in turn tries to say that compensation isn't necessary, but suddenly she thinks of something. So although it's a little uncomfortable, she decides to make a request. What she wants is a way to check the completion rate of her food materials. In short, it's actually a taste test. It's like letting other players try the food she makes to receive evaluations. If she receives a good rating from players, she can gain experience points. This is visible to the protagonist right away because the system opens a window to evaluate the food from earlier. To be honest, Ashes just started playing this game too and wasn't able to ask any friends for help. Therefore, she says that if it's too much trouble, she's fine with being ignored. However, the hero says there's no chance of turning her down and with a smile has to be registered as her friend, guaranteeing that he will always help with the evaluations just as is doing now with the onigiri to the girl's happiness. Thus, the protagonist's daily gaming session finally comes to an end. Right after returning to reality, his friends yell, saying there's no tutorial quest in the starting city. Ignoring that, the protagonist says he also met a really nice person. However, now he can interpret what his friends meant about there being no tutorial quest. In the end, he also thought it was too much for a beginner quest. Then Ol, giving her point of view, strongly believes it's probably a hidden quest, which makes everyone very curious. Taiyu, in turn, gets excited because if that's the case, it would be something amazing. Hidden quests can only be challenged by the first people who find them, and that same person must acquire a custom item. And now that the hero thinks about it, the shopkeeper said something similar to that. After collecting the required number of items, the protagonist returned to the shop. And their girl thanks him a lot because now with all those materials, she could turn things around. With that, the protagonist's first quest was successfully completed, which made him very happy. However, suddenly saying that the previous needs were just to get her shot back on track, the girl suggested that he could gather more so she could make a personalized skill book for Ryu. And because her face looked very beautiful, the hero simply accepted without thinking. Since her face looked much more beautiful than before, Ryu only now understood what that meant. So Taiyu says it's a side quest and praises the hero a lot for discovering something like that on his first day. But once again, he forgot what happens when you compliment someone as individualistic as the hero. Therefore, Taiyu was a little startled by the boy's expression, but I was already used to it since it's something he always does when he enjoys a game. Later, already back in the fantasy world of the game, the next materials needed for the shopkeeper will be obtained by hunting goblins. But not just goblins, also hobgoblins and the strongest of them, the goblin general. Apparently, the hero will be able to get all these materials by taking down the monsters. And just because of that, even when facing an army, he gets excited to hunt them all at once. Already starting with a kick to the face of one of the goblins without any mercy, followed by a precise slash to a hobgoblin. Finally, after defeating monsters up to the intermediate goblin level, the hero stands in front of the general, and without even thinking, he charges in confident that he'll easily defeat the monster. Sometime later, Ashes seems to be in trouble because a man appears, intimidating her. And just by looking at how uncomfortable his friend is, a hero practically trembles with rage. That same man insists on going somewhere with her, but the girl clearly doesn't want to. Even so, the guy proves to be even worse by trying to touch her until at the last second. His arm is grabbed, leaving everyone surprised. And the one responsible is the protagonist who tells the nuisance to stop making his friend uncomfortable. Obviously, being a sort of thud, the guy grabs the protagonist to confront him. Then finding it funny, the hero asks the guy to calm down and with a terrifying face, says they can come to a peaceful agreement, leaving the troublemaker completely scared and making him run off without looking back. Faced with this, the girl asks what the hero did, but Ryu gives the excuse that he simply persuaded him like any civilized man. Anyway, Ashes called the protagonist and being really bad at asserting herself, thanks him with an angelic expression, praising Ryu's kindness and making his heart race. But Ryu also isn't very good with these things, which makes him run off, giving the excuse that he needs to go pick up a skill book. And so Ashes is left alone in the alley, believing the protagonist is someone really busy. Already a bit farther away, the hero realizes that if he had stayed there any longer, he would have said something weird because what Ashes awakens in him is frightening. In any case, now it really is time to get his personalized item. Upon entering the shop, the shopkeeper immediately begins an impressive magical ritual. And when the item is created, the protagonist is amazed at how incredible the effects are. Suddenly, the effects begin to be written into the skill book. Until finally, the shopkeeper completes her newest invention with great effort, which is the Book of the Power of Faith, and also the only skill book in this world that belongs solely to the hero. Thus, the protagonist sincerely thanks her for the reward. But the girl says she's the one who should be thankful since she got the chance to restart her business. With that, the protagonist heads out to test the power of the book on the field monsters. And there, he wonders what kinds of monsters while they are hoping to find some strong ones. But the protagonist doesn't have to wait long because someone has already come to greet him. That someone being a giant centipede monster of the forest, and instead of being afraid, the protagonist charges forward, hoping to face a worthy opponent. Unexpectedly, this time, his confidence doesn't guarantee victory because his surprise is attacks don't do much. Both the wolves and the goblins took heavy damage with the first punch, but this centipede didn't even flinch. Because of that, the monster begins launching attacks against the protagonist, and after dodging a bit, he believes it's the right time to test his new ability. Without wasting any more time, he clasps his hands together and summons the Sword of Faith and Shield of Faith through activation. Both appear from the sky as if they were divine artifacts and join their wielder. However, something else begins to appear at high speed and fuses with the hero's body, making him feel a bit strange. Now the mind stat has been converted into strength and defense with this new power. The priest class usually focuses on enhancing mental power, but now our hero is completely opposite. A defense buff is exactly what a solo player like him needs, and even though with a low-level skill, there's a huge difference just by having it. In this case, with the centipede in front of him prepared to strike again, Liu braces himself to face it head-on. And with a single blow, the monster is completely defeated, leaving the hero very satisfied. Sometime later at the love bar, that same young man from before appears visibly upset, prompting the bartender to ask for his order. Even more irritated, the man requests a punishment designed to make his enemy suffer. Without wasting time, he hands over the protagonist's photo, intending to make him quit playing Theo forever. Regardless, the man trusts the bartender who accepts the job. At that moment, he activates his unique skill, summoning the so-called bond breakers. Right after defeating the giant centipede, the hero remarks that it was a very resilient opponent. Moreover, the reward for defeating the Forest Lord was also quite valuable. However, suddenly, something draws his attention, a strange feeling of being watched. Simultaneously, the names Gast Paki and Zaza are clearly heard being called out. For Ryu, since the game feels incredibly real, this becomes a significant concern. Still, it proves useful as he can locate people using only noise like by throwing a stone. Following this, someone catches the projectile, but this person is clearly not alone. Ryu, in turn, becomes worried for having acted carelessly and for thinking it was a monster. He starts apologizing. The man on the other hand praises Ryu's danger awareness and recognizes him as a priest, surprising Ryu. Quickly, the hero asks for the person's identity and whether they have business with him. However, before receiving an answer, he believes he already knows the reason. Thus, he begins making guesses, all of which are incorrect and almost mocking. Already quite irritated, the leader shouts out that they are the bond breakers. In any case, Fu regains his composure as he had heard Taiyu mention them before. In the past, he was clearly warned to be careful with them as they are a guild specializing in eliminating players in FIO. Even so, the protagonist asks why they act that way, and it is revealed that they receive items for completing such missions and follow specific rules about target levels and acceptance conditions. Apparently, according to Taiyu, the bond breakers only accept missions against well-known players. To Ryu, this merely shows the group's resentment, and he openly states that opinion. This enrages the guild, though the leader manages to remain somewhat composed. For, according to him, any humiliation or loss will become enjoyment once they defeat the hero. As the enemies approach, Ryu realizes it's his first time fighting actual people inside the game. And compared to monsters, which move based on codes, players have their own will. Therefore, he becomes excited just thinking about which method he will use to defeat them. Quickly, one of the members approaches, a bit unsettled by the smile identical to the photo. But believing he will win easily, he begins to attack in various ways, still missing every strike. Ryu dodges all of them, thinking it would be painful to be hit, but states he won't be touched even if he tried, further infuriating the hooded ones. Now fully enraged, one of them uses all of his magical power to try burning everything around. However, he must such declarations, the hero simply finds the situation amusing. With nothing left to wait for, the protagonist charges forward, knowing he can crush them all without remorse. In response, the assassins attempt to coordinate and surround him. However, the hero states that this very behavior is what makes them so ineffective. Ryu summons his priest item and to end the battle once and for all, vanishes leaving the hooded one searching for him. Nevertheless, when they find him, the situation could not be worse as a giant tree begins to fall on everyone. And due to poor judgment, they run straight into the only direction with no escape, being crushed by the trunk. Very strategically, the protagonist eliminates all subordinates with a single attack. However, their leader sees this as a good thing as he wishes to defeat the hero with his own hands. Overflowing with energy, he asks the boy to say his final words. However, the battle isn't even shown as he is defeated in a more humiliating way than the others. With no enemies left, Ryu begins to confront the man who never imagined it would end like this. But he truly expected more from them since even the centipede was stronger. In any case, we would ask for the name of the person who ordered the hit, but the leader says that the motto of their guild is to complete the job regardless of what has to be done. And then suddenly, he pulls a glowing orb from his cloak that within seconds begins to shine several times brighter until the boy is teleported to a completely different place left not knowing where he is. And in that place, the number of monsters is greater than anything the hero has ever seen, leaving him even more confused than at the start. Without having to think much, a hero understands that he was teleported to the location of a boss above his level. This is truly a very dirty tactic, since the boy knows without even checking their status window that the strength and number are at least 5 levels higher. But the biggest problem of all is the monster behind the smaller beasts. That is the level 35 Scarlet Demon Wolf. Definitely the most dangerous wolf-type boss, even compared to the other bosses he's faced. However, instead of being afraid, the hero actually gets excited, ready to thank the Heartbreakers for the chance to defeat so many strong monsters. Without wasting time, the hero starts by throwing his weapon at a goblin and destroying a beetle monster with a kick. At first, he was under pressure, but the boy thinks this is nothing. So far, there are beast-type monsters along with humanoid types and finally, the insectoid types before the boss. These monsters are of the same types he's already defeated, and even though they are stronger, the method seems to be the same. While dodging the monster's attacks, the protagonist can take advantage of the openings to precisely hit their weak points. Therefore, the beasts end up being a bit disappointing, not much of a problem despite their high level. In the end, the real problems are the magic circles in the place. Even after defeating all those weak monsters, their numbers keep increasing, making it impossible to reach the boss. In addition, with a yawn, it's clear the boss is even a little bored. So trembling with rage, the hero becomes determined to smash those circles to pieces. Once again summoning his weapons, thinking he might scare his friends if they find out, Reeves decides to hide the fact that he has a second scepter and soon begins to rapidly defeat all the small monsters that appear in front of him. Thus, he gets closer to the magic circle that spawns monsters until he charges in, ready to say goodbye to that annoying thing, breaking all the monster generators into pieces and becoming the only one left standing on the battlefield among the secondary enemies. Very proud of his accomplishment. Now the only thing left for our hero is to face the strongest enemy in the area, who quickly rises to his feet to finish off the protagonist. Faced with that, Ryu mocks the fact that he finally stood up while asking the monster not to disappoint him. And so seemingly understanding the provocation, the monster howls, generating a sound vibration that even starts to crack the ground. The pain the protagonist feels in his ears is very real, so he thinks the developers are completely stupid. In any case, hearing wasn't the only problem, because while the distortion was happening, the monster charged in for early combat, launching the protagonist until he crashes back first into a large rock, which leaves him badly injured. All that power combined with speed causes the protagonist to lose nearly 8% of his HP, so he starts to heal in order to get back up. However, that monster doesn't seem willing to let the hero have even a moment's rest. And even though it's just a game where you can feel the boss's intimidation, it's even hard to breathe. Nevertheless, as he thinks about what he should do, a laugh bursts from the face of our hero, because this is truly the first time he feels so thrilled playing this game. Thus, quickly, the priest weapons are summoned, and enchantments of every possible attribute type are released through magic, boosting the protagonist's stats to a level never seen before. With power overflowing through his body, the time has finally come to finish off this little puppy. Back in the real world somewhere, people comment that the long-awaited date is today. More specifically, Taihu mentions that tonight is the Crimson Moon Night and asks Io if she's ever participated. In response, the girl says yes, but facing more than 100 monsters 15 levels above her becomes impossible. For her, only a lunatic would throw themselves into a mess like that. And for Taiyo, that's exactly the hero's case. However, the girl believes it's too much even for him, and either way, Taiyo's attention shifts as he realizes he won a prize from the popsicle stick. Back in the game, a wave of energy is released from the protagonist's weapon, clashes with the wolf's claws, and right after the first strike, they both pull back. Faced with that, Ryu is impressed by the amount of power packed into the monster's attacks. And in front of the boy, the intimidation the wolf demonstrates in combat grows even stronger. Therefore, doing the same thing as always, exploiting weaknesses during openings, will be impossible this time. However, the first monsters he defeated in fear were actually wolves, and even in large numbers, the hero took them all down with a smile on his face. Thus, hope returns once again, with Ryu certain the same will apply to the big one. Once again, the two stand face to face, waiting for the opponent to make the first move. However, just as the wolf is about to attack, it howls, and from that immense sound, several magic portals begin to appear in the sky, leaving the protagonist completely confused. And from those magic circles, it doesn't take long for new problems to appear for our hero. It seems to be a rain of magical projectiles, something the wolf had not been able to do until now. In any case, the protagonist dodges, believing it won't matter if they don't hit him. However, as if by poetic justice, the moment he says that one of the projectiles hits him, causing considerable damage. In the end, the magic shots were just a decoy for a long-range tail attack. And even while in a defensive stance using his abilities, 20% of his max HP is gone. Moreover, despite being a priest, a protagonist doesn't want to use all of his mana just for healing. Upon further analysis, it's clear that the wolf has the advantage. So if its weakness isn't exploited, it won't work. Once again, the hero summons his scepter and charges at high speed to crush the monster. Aiming at the wolf's right paw, which is somehow positioned just right, naturally, the magic shot rain must also affect other living beings. Therefore, the strategy now is to get beneath the wolf to use it as a shield. This way, the hero removes the advantage of long-range attacks and also reduces the tail's range. In this case, there's no doubt that the only method of attacking will be with one of its claws. And the moment the right claw is lifted, the back left leg becomes the monster's biggest weak point. Thus, the first successful blow is dealt by our hero. With that, the monster can no longer use its claws, and even if it jumps away, it no longer matters. Especially because, with that advantage, the protagonist takes the opportunity to land many more attacks. And so one of the wolf's supporting legs becomes completely useless from the injuries. And with his plan working, all that remains now is to finish the monster with his final attack. In this way, the protagonist's aura flows through every corner while his enemy finally approaches defeat. Now less than 10% of the beast's total HP remains, so View charges forward with tremendous greed. However, it is at that moment that the crescent moon on the monster's forehead begins to shine like a true sun that lights up everything. And as the protagonist's confidence is shaken, a new creature appears on the battlefield, one even stronger than the previous one. This is the second form of the Scarlet Demon Wolf boss. With this new evolution, the monster practically doubles in size, so our hero swallows all that earlier pride. At this moment, the right leg that was destroyed is fully recovered, and this time, the claws even seem enhanced. But it wasn't just its appearance that changed, its stats and abilities did as well. Before attacking, the wolf crouches on the ground and begins to coil in an intimidating way, until using its body like a spring for propulsion, it lunges and manages to bite the protagonist, tearing off a piece of him. All of that is very different for our hero. Seeing an arm far from his body is something that causes an unbelievable shock. With all that speed, even dodging a direct impact, the hero's HP loss is unreal. Without thinking twice, Ryu runs as fast as he can while using all his energy to heal himself. He can feel that his mana level is low, but first, he needs to gain distance to reassess, something the monster won't allow so easily. Now a bit farther away, the monster suddenly stops the chase for some reason. Ryu, in turn, thinks that if it's another rain of magic shots, they won't hit him. However, suddenly, an energy begins to glow from the monster's mouth, immediately making our hero understand what's coming. And from inside its mouth comes a massive blast of energy that destroys everything in its path, leaving behind only thick smoke and a trail of devastation on the ground. All these different abilities were already making the protagonist desperate, and more than anything, very irritated. On this night, the boy begins to think of this game as bad and irrational, but solving this kind of situation might be fun. Both are already at their limits. While the hero can't recover his health, the monster can use large movements. However, the protagonist is out of mana and severely injured, unlike the beast. In any case, Ryu believes that the only thing that can be done at this moment is a gamble. Before fighting, the Scarlet Demon Wolf analyzes a lot, and the same is true for the protagonist. But now that he already has a plan in mind, Ryu moves in to finish off his little puppy once and for all. Definitely getting close to those terrifying abilities is hard, but it's necessary to create a new opening. At that exact moment, an opportunity finally appears for our hero because the monster begins charging another long-range attack. It's the mouth energy blast that completely destroys everything in front of it. But even with those boosted stats, the attack certainly consumes a lot of mana. And since it's a finishing move, it must take some time to recover afterward. That said, what's necessary now is to endure this attack encounter with his own final move. The problem is that whether Ryu survives the attack or not, if everything goes according to plan, he may still find a way. Without further delay, the monster unleashes its attack, which comes at high speed. Then together with the Shield of Faith that boosts defense, the hero also applies an enhancement on top of it. And so with an ecstatic shout, he activates his regeneration ability. Inevitably, the monster strike hits the protagonist, and the Scarlet Demon Wolf waits for the dust to settle. However, it doesn't have to wait long for a sign, because suddenly, something emerges from the smoke, revealing itself as our hero. Ryu shows his mockery at the highest level possible for still being alive. He boosted his defense stats with the Shield of Faith and stacked it with a defense enhancement while using regeneration to recover. That last ability restores a small portion of HP per second, making it necessary to withstand and outlast the attack while taking minimal damage. Therefore, Ryu shouts that this is how a real priest fights. Without wasting time, the boy uses the enhancement booster followed by the detonating power, and with that, his final attack is charged and ready to strike the enemy. Then the blow finally lands, and with this enhanced attack, the protagonist at last manages to finish off the Scarlet Demon Wolf. With a complete subjugation, a system message appears congratulating him, and, of course, the hero's attributes are increased, along with a bonus of 300,000 coins, plus the fang and claws of the Scarlet Wolf. Lastly, the skill levels of the Sword of Faith and Shield of Faith also increase to our hero's delight. After all, for him having that much money is the true happiness. However, the hero wasn't enjoying this moment alone because from behind a tree, a certain person had recorded everything and obviously got very excited because they had just captured an interesting event. With hundreds of gold coins falling from the sky, the hero starts to feel scared how amazing the rewards are. Also, he's sure the Heartbreakers are going to regret this a lot. The hero is also interested in the other rewards, but since he's tired, he'll log off for today and return to the real world. Back at his house later, the hero's friends insist that he wake up quickly, which causes the protagonist to snap awake. Still not understanding what it's about, Ryu asked about breakfast, but Theo yells that they wouldn't bother him over something like that. In fact, they were very excited about the achievement the protagonist had accomplished, which he obviously still didn't understand. A few minutes later, back in the game world, at the moment the hero appears in the lobby, he notices a completely different atmosphere that makes him wonder what's going on. Quickly, Ashes appears to greet her friend with a sweet expression as always. Ryu then says he's happy to see someone he knows, but asks what's going on with everyone. Extremely euphoric, the girl says it's because of the video from yesterday where the hero was amazing. And since he hasn't even seen the video, the girl decides to show it to him now. In the video, it even shows the hero mocking the little dog who appears to his surprise. Then Ashes explains that someone with a reporter job recorded that scene, which made a popular topic. That way, the hero finally understands why his friends were acting so strangely in the morning. Instead of being happy, Ryu finds it all very embarrassing for violating his privacy. But on the other hand, Ashes thought it was really cool how the boy kept fighting even after many battles. And more than that, what she meant was that Ryu was amazing, reaching the hero's deepest feelings. By the way, while the protagonist is thinking about her cute expression, the girl asks if he would mind going together to the second city called Yuvil. Now that's mentioned, the protagonist hasn't been there yet and asks why. Then a bit embarrassed, Ash replies that she's focusing on raising her stats, but is worried about the monsters along the way. And a chance to spend some time with the girl was exactly what the hero wanted. So without even thinking twice, it was decided that they would leave the next day. Once again logging out of the game back at his house, our hero prepares dinner with unusual excitement. Because of that, Taiyu asks why he's in such a good mood since the protagonist is usually reserved. However, unlike the guy who was interested, a plate was broken in anger by Io, who figured Ryu was flirting with another girl. In that case, Taiyu asks if he was actually flirting, but the hero doesn't think that's the case. Besides, he really doesn't understand why Al was so angry. Changing the subject, Taiyu then asked the boy to at least understand one thing. The truth is that it was Al who came up with the idea of giving Theo as a birthday present and was very happy thinking they would play together. So the hero understands why even after giving him the game, she's been alone until now. And at that moment, he also thinks of a way to fix things. Back in the game, an ice arrow is fired at a rock, which breaks in half. That's Io's power, which she says is the result of her efforts to improve. At first, the hero asked for help since he received his spell book as a reward, but reaching that level would be hard, especially because during his previous training, he only managed to do a single magic shot. In this case, Io asks if it wouldn't be better for him to try learning from that girl, which creates a silence between them. And to fix that, the hero says he'll give her his magic skills book as a present. Obviously, the two start arguing about it because even though she really wants it, it was earned with a lot of effort. But the protagonist says he prefers using physical attacks over magic. And since he's really enjoying the game, he wants to give her the book as thanks for the gift. That way, thinking a bit about what's happening, Elle gets really embarrassed. And since technically, there's no other choice, she decides to accept it gladly. That way, the mission to cheer up his friend is complete in the hero's mind. So he says he's leaving now, but will come back later to keep playing. In the end, the reason he left was because Elle was too cute for him to talk properly. But right after he left, it became clear the girl was feeling the same way about Ryu. The next day, in front of the city central clock, the hero is seen tapping his feet anxiously. That's because there are still 30 minutes until the meeting time at 2 p.m. And after only a minute has passed, he checks again to see how much time is left. Because today is the day he'll become Ash's escort, and they'll walk just the two of them, something already making the protagonist's mind wander. Anyway, only another 30 seconds go by, and despite scaring people, he convinces himself he's not nervous. So naturally, players try not to draw too much attention until suddenly from afar, someone calls out to our protagonist. It's Ashes, who runs up asking if she's late. Obviously, the protagonist answers no because in truth, he arrived way too early. Then more embarrassed than ever, she replies that she came now because she was excited about the date, and that cuteness basically shatters the protagonist's composure. Even so, knowing he has to keep his sanity, he asks if they should head out to Juval now. And since that's exactly what Ashes wants, Rue drops the whole idea of trying to keep his composure. After some time, the two go to a low forest, and Ashes really enjoys the moment, even regretting having brought an escort. However, the hero warns that since the grass is very tall, there might be monsters hiding underneath, which makes her panic. In the end, the protagonist was just joking, but it wasn't a lie either because apparently the monsters weren't attacking due to the level difference. And Ryu really wants to enjoy his time today, so he thinks it's better to set those things aside. By the way, the girl asks what kind of rewards the hero received from the last battle since it was a big event. And in response, the hero starts to say that it was several things, but suddenly something begins to approach. Since it looks like a cute bunny, Ashes gets very excited, but soon the monster's true form is revealed. Ashes had indeed heard that the boss of this place was a giant rabbit. And since the boss isn't afraid of our hero, he thinks it's a good opportunity, especially because he'll defeat it using the rewards he received when the girl waits. Without waiting long, the protagonist summons his new weapon called the Scarlet Warmest Dissectum. One of its good features is the fact that it's light despite its size and it greatly increases attack power. And not only that, the title he received from the subjugation is also activated. The title, in turn, has a little laugh next to the class, but what matters is that it grants resistance to physical attacks. So with these new powers, the protagonist doesn't mind starting now. Quite full of itself, the monster charges to attack first, but as soon as the hero dodges, he counterattacks from below. Making the monster fall on its back, the hero jumps over it and lands a fatal blow with all his strength. Thus, the giant white rabbit is defeated, and the girl's admiration for Ryu only grows. To her, it's amazing that he defeated the monster in an instant, but the hero explains that it was easy compared to the Crimson Wolf. Even so, Ryu says he has other things he wants to test. And to explain, he shows his status window where there is a summon sermon spell, which obviously makes both of them very curious to find out what it is. Ashes wonders what kind of magic that is since it seems to be in summon monster. Since they are talking about summon beasts, who thinks that beast that's big and strong would be cool, and Ashes thinks it might be nice to have something like a very beautiful spirit that has charisma in addition to strength. In the end, both options are very interesting, like a true dream. But regardless, they'll only know when they summon it, and the hero comments it's a shame there aren't enemies nearby. Anyway, it says he has to use mana stones to begin, and since the hero already has several from his last battles, he simply decides to use all of them at once. Then a type of chant appears to be recited. How I long for those who would walk beside me, how I long for those who would be my sword and shield, and how I long for those who would obey me. Come to my side and become my servant. I offer you my mana, so come to me, my servant. After reciting this, an intense magical energy begins to form, making both of them very anxious. Ryu truly can't wait to see what kind of beast will be summoned. And suddenly, from that energy, the magic starts to take the shape of something, until finally a summoning appears, a half-blood little girl who obviously doesn't understand what's happening. Ryu practically faints from so much cuteness, but something still doesn't seem quite right. because based on the mana stones he used, a strong and resilient servant should have come. However, someone else who found the girl adorable was Ashes, not even caring about anything else. After all, the little girl had cat ears and was extremely cute. Still trying to understand, Ryu thinks this might be a beast with healing and recovery skills related to his class. Besides that, the hero believes it might have been a good decision not to summon her during a battle. But suddenly, a giant bear jumps down from a mountain, which makes our hero very excited. But before he could do anything, that little girl who seemed helpless ran ahead like a lightning bolt. Right away, both Ryu and Ashes started yelling for the little one to come back because it was dangerous. But what they didn't know was that the moment the monster tried to attack, she would dodge without any problem. Ryu can hardly believe what is seen, and time after time, the beast girl keeps dodging with ease until she grabs one of the bear's arms and disables it with a twist. Inevitably, the thoughts of both players about the girl begin to change. And seeing how badly she beats up that monster, it becomes clear that this little girl is much more amazing than they thought. With just a few simple blows, the monster is defeated, and any trace of it is completely erased, leaving Ryu even a little scared. So when she finishes her job, the girl looks quite confident. And because she's proud like a puppy, the protagonist pats her as a reward. By the way, Ashes points out that the servant still doesn't have a name, and upon hearing that, the hero starts thinking of one. Until he finally concludes that I am would be good, which luckily also pleases the little girl. Because of that, the two players are also very happy. But soon, the protagonist starts to show his true personality, getting even more excited. Because with his newest servant, his combat capabilities will be taken to another level. Sometime later, still in that forest, while the birds chirp peacefully, a giant bear monster came crashing through, destroying everything. And right behind it, our protagonist was kicking every monster in the forest together with his new servant. Ashes, for her part, is happy that the two are so capable, but also asks if it's really necessary to destroy the whole forest before leaving. A bit embarrassed, Ryu apologizes for going too far, and now that Im is already used to fighting, they can move on. So the group walks until Ashes sees something interesting because they finally reached the second city. This is the famous city of Juval, and upon observing everything from the blacksmiths working to the merchants selling weapons, the hero finds it all amazing as it seems to be a city of craftsmen. Ashes agrees but also warns they should be careful because there are rumors about what happens to non-craftsmen. And to illustrate, someone appears throwing a girl far away. Quickly, a random person asks what the priest thinks of his staff, telling a long and boring story. Then he offers the item to the protagonist with a 30% discount, but not before another person appears asking for attention. And even though he's only wearing a little speedo, this man markets his product claiming it's better than the other one. Thus, both the bald man, the fake Ricardo Milosh, and another intruder begin to argue to make a sale. Therefore, Ashes finishes what she was saying by explaining that when someone who's not a creator shows up in the city, things like this happen. Still, she asks if the boy found anything interesting. But for now, he wants to run away more than anything. Sometime later, the three finally manage to shake off the annoying vendors. But Ashes remains happy that they managed to arrive there without any trouble, thanks to the protagonist. And about that, the hero refuses to take the credit because he also really enjoyed traveling with her. Until a shock hits his mind, our hero simply chatted with Ashes casually, and because of that, he apologizes 1,000 times. However, it's not like the girl didn't like it since they are friends after all. So Ashes says she'll start calling the hero Ryu from now on. After all, using honorifics is getting a bit weird. But with so much cuteness, our hero can't manage a single word in response. Therefore, the two just decide to call each other by name, creating a certain atmosphere, until suddenly, a very loud noise ruins everything because it scares everyone, making the players go into combat stance. Unexpectedly, a voice comments that cat ears reflect their emotions, and more than that, compliments how amazing I am is. Thus, impressed by the girl's beauty, a certain guy asks if she's part of the two's group. But in any case, with a brilliant golden light, the man who claims to be a hero states that his mind is made up. And because of the girl's perfect form, Im scores 100 million in his judgment meter. In addition, the man introduces himself with his own personal show in a very over-the-top and clearly cringeworthy way. And he doesn't forget to make it clear in the end how much he likes cute little girls. But to his surprise, his presentation wasn't met with enthusiasm by the others. On the contrary, the three were certain that they were facing a lunatic. So realizing he had been a bit disrespectful, the guy introduces himself as Jadal, leader of the Court of Knights Guild. And since the guild's purpose is to adventure in search of beautiful girls, the leader can't hold back after finding someone so perfect. Anyway, he asked to be told the secret to becoming friends with someone like that. But before he even realizes it, the group is already far away from there. Ryu, being as clever as he is, didn't think twice before running away from Adlinatic. However, unexpectedly, the weirdo was much faster than the three and instantly appeared surrounding the group. After all, until the secret was revealed, Juval was determined to follow the hero to the ends of the world, which made Ryu acknowledge the man's abilities despite how disgusting he was. The protagonist's plan was to use the distraction to vanish from his line of sight, but Juval managed to appear quickly. Therefore, the hero understands that if he underestimates the guild leader, he will lose. And once he is defeated, will certainly face a very bad fate. As a man, Ryu has the duty to prevent that so he can enjoy the game without any guilt. After all, even Ash has already discussed it with this man becoming even a bit aggressive. And unexpectedly, this makes the guild leader feel a bit offended. So the hero thinks that if Juval is this sensitive, it might be easy to drive him away. However, this madman was actually enjoying being humiliated by the girl. Then Ashes became furious and Ryu lost all hope of resolving things peacefully. Determined to stop this pervert, the protagonist summons his scepter to fight. And in response, Juval warns that the boy won't want to use that method. But before the fight, he still decides to take a closer look at the little girl, making Ashes scream for the protagonist, very angry with everything. Ryu declares that he will wipe this worm out of the game. However, even trying to attack with all he's got, the guild leader manages to dodge easily. Thus, Juval boasts about how fast he is, saying he won't be hit by such obvious attacks, especially because as long as he has his final secret move called pervert maneuvers, he will keep dodging everything. That said, now the lunatic goes back to his plan of getting a little closer to the girl. Even more furious, the hero yells that Juval's demands are getting more and more outrageous. And since the protagonist decides not to cooperate, the leader of the Court of Knights prepares to make his first move. Juval uses his secret attack called perverted maneuvers. Shadow clones fill in the alley with his images and leaving Ashes completely terrified that they might be dealing with a real-life criminal, which Jabba confirms. In that case, Ryu states that he will annihilate all the guy's clones before they get close to Bayon. However, even after several attempts, no attack lands on the target, who makes sure to mock them a lot. Because of that, Ryu starts to get frustrated, and Ashes becomes even more desperate than before. But at the moment, the lunatic gets closed, the beast girl is able to sense the enemy's presence. And the second, before he could complete his plan, turned and lend a powerful kick to the man's face, which despite knocking him out was exactly what this creep wanted most. That could be seen in the words of satisfaction he was muttering unconsciously. Ryu, for his part, was impressed because while he couldn't even keep up with Juval's speed, his servant defeated him. Therefore, it became clear to the hero that was born to cover his weaknesses. And also because she did a great job, Ryu rewards her with a good head pat. Anyway, now they could go back to the creators' shops, much to Ash's relief. After that, Juval was reported for his behavior to the superiors and had his account banned. Sometime later, the players finally arrived at the place Ashes wanted to be. This is the largest creators' hub in Theo called the Juval workshop. So without thinking twice, the three decide to go inside right away. And if possible, the protagonist has a request to make to Ashes, which he hopes she will accept. But right behind him appears someone who had been looking for him. And shortly after, this man reports to his superior that he saw the hero at the Juval workshop. With great interest, the superior replies that this means that that thing is in this city. And precisely because of that, the boss believes it might be good to personally go and greet Ryu. From inside the workshop, while the blacksmiths work meticulously, the group walks through, noticing how focused they all are. After all, this is the largest workshop in Juval, and everyone is creating equipment to be used in battles. Ryu always knew the game was realistic, but he never thought the crafting process would be too. Ashes, for her part, recalls the time she asked the boy for feedback on her food since there's also a food-specialized workshop nearby. And, obviously, the girl is very eager to visit it, but the hero suddenly starts complimenting her in a weird way. And before he realizes it, he no longer knows how to make the request that's right on the tip of his tongue. The request itself is for Ashes to make the hero's armor. Since he obtained through the Crimson Wolf Stone, Ryu believes that an armor made from the same material will also be amazing. However, the hero thinks this request will basically feel like a confession. So he tries to come up with a way to say it without sounding strange. To solve this issue, the hero asks if Ashes intends to create a weapon or armor since she wanna come to the workshop. With a sincere smile, the girl says yes because she wants to help other players. Besides that, if she creates items with high rarity materials, it will be even easier to level up. So Ryu sees this as the perfect opportunity to act and calls the girl without thinking twice. However, suddenly a noise distracts her, ruining the moment. To explain it, a blacksmith calls the group and says that the commotion is because of Azumina's arrival. Even now, the players don't understand what it's about, but the girls in turrets appears at the gate. And since the guards are also there, the blacksmith starts to get worried. On the other hand, our hero remains confused, especially because this patrol of people keeps getting closer. First, a subordinate yells to call Ryu, very irritated by how indifferently they treated his boss. Just like a proper servant, he presents the manager of the #1 crafting guild. And as he turns his back for her to sit, this beautiful lady from a service pack corporation, known as a source of charisma, is called Azamina. And faced with all of that, all Ryu can think is that he keeps meeting strange people in this city. So he asks if the guy made that ridiculous introduction on his own or if it was ordered, which obviously makes everyone very irritated, needing to be stopped by their own leader. After all, she kind of likes the hero's bold personality. Without further delay, the girl greets the priest, apologizing for the rude behavior of her subordinates. But all he wants is to be released so he can leave quickly. Sensing that feeling, Azumina says they don't want to waste time there either. So getting straight to the point, she asks for the items and materials the boy got from the Crimson Wolf so she can make armor for him. Knowing that the hero understands how hard it is to make armor, if a low-level crafter tries to work with rare items, the result will be disastrous. But in this world, that's not a problem for her as she is the best creator and can produce the armor at its maximum potential. So the hero understands what this is about, but something catches Azumia's attention, making her ask if you asked the creator beside him to make the armor. Therefore, analyzing ashes, she warns that this is a decision that must be well thought out. After all, low-level creators only produce low-level items into Azamina. Ashes doesn't even deserve to be there. With all this judgment, the protagonist's companion becomes very sad, and Ryu clearly notices it, taking her pain upon himself. So to break Azumina's arrogance, our hero challenges her to a test, and based on the results, it will be decided who will make the armor. Regarding this test, even though she finds it very cruel to be judged like that, the blonde says she doesn't mind. Besides, she's already happy that the protagonist isn't a fool influenced by emotions. And since he suggested a test, Azumina says he'll witness the difference between a true expert and an amateur. Ashes, for her part, apologizes while humbling herself for being a beginner in the game. But instead of easing the criticism, the blonde says that's an excuse used by trash. After all, in Ash's bag, there's a knife made by a beginner, and even if she made 130 of those, it won't surpass the A+ rating. Then Ashes asks how the girl knows that since she didn't even show the item. And Azumina explains that every great creator has a skill called aesthetic eyes. In this case, the girl says that if Ashes understands that, she should step aside because incompetent people should quit the game. And the whole time, the hero's friend is being ignored, which he notices. Ashes has always been introverted, so Ryu bets that she doesn't have other friends. And since she's enjoying the game at her own pace, it makes sense to be judged by veterans. Ryu, for his part, can understand that feeling of theirs, but that doesn't mean they can steal someone's happiness just to make fun of it. Anyway, Azumina asks what kind of test will be done. Then saying it won't be a difficult test, the protagonist summons his scepter, wanting to do a durability experiment. Naturally, it would be problematic if the armor meant to protect him breaks easily. So the hero will test the blonde's armor and will obviously compensate for the materials if it breaks. However, since it's an armor made from the best materials, Ryu hopes it won't break. Azumina, on the other hand, doesn't find it complicated at all and soon summons her armored dragon armor, which is at the peak of ++ rank. This is an excellent armor that increases durability by 20% when hit, and not even a mid-level boss can leave a scratch. Therefore, for Azumina, even though the protagonist defeated the Crimson Wolf, he is still a newbie. So since she doesn't mind Ryu trying to attack it, our hero decides to begin. And unexpectedly, with just one strike, he shatters the armor into pieces, leaving everyone in shock. Right away, Ryu realizes what he did and with a mischievous smile comments that apparently there was nothing special about the armor. In that case, Azumina lies saying that shield was made by her subordinates, and she soon summons the Super Beetle armor, which is classified as AAA. But just like the first armor, the protagonist destroys it too. Next, the Obsidian Dragon armor of S rank is summoned for the test. But our hero also blows up the armor as if it were a toy. Finally, the Sky Dragon armor of S rank, which even top-rank players can acquire. Well, with even more pleasure, the protagonist destroys this one just like the others, leaving all members of the Creators Guild stunned. In the end, none of the armors were useful for the hero's durability test. Therefore, he apologizes, saying he can't trust the result of that creation. And for truly not being able to withstand any of his hits, Azumina panics. That Ryu explains that each of her creations has a small flaw that will cause a big problem when the armor is pushed to its limit. However, once an armor made by Ashes was shown, and even though the equipment level was low, it was flawless. And that's why Ryu prefers Ashes' creations, which are more detailed and more appropriate for making his armor. Thus, confronted by all these truths thrown in her face, Azumina snaps and leaves, screaming that she won't give another chance in the future. Until finally, the guards also leave the workshop, and now the protagonist starts to think that what he said earlier was practically another confession. Once again, he let himself be carried away by emotions, but Ashes called him over to express how grateful she was for that. Because of it all, Ashes admitted she believed she was a burden to other players and felt so relieved after hearing those words. Therefore, more than ever, she will dedicate herself so that the hero can be proud of her, and Ryu definitely reaches peak happiness upon hearing that. Back to the defeated ones, at a certain moment, Asumina stops running, but she doesn't stop harboring resentment for the next time she meets the hero. However, that only lasts until something appears in front of her, turning all that rage into fear. Before the group of creators stands a certain person whose job was supposed to be that of a reporter. This person is Aura, who previously said she needed nothing but her camera. Given that, the girl says it's true and explains that she's only there looking for an exclusive story. So since Aura is very influential in the journalism community, Asumina feels intimidated, especially because the reporter was also the one responsible for recording the video of the protagonist against the Crimson Wolf, making him popular. Moreover, there are rumors she's the leader of the famous players, so one must act carefully. Very nervous, Asumina comments that if Aura came to interview her, she arrived at a bad time. However, Aura makes it clear that she wasn't looking for any of that, saying an interview with her wouldn't make much success anyway. The truth is that the girl is planning to make a documentary about the protagonist because she finds him very interesting. In addition, she was passing by with her camera to record today's events, also capturing the conversations in the process. Therefore, one of the things that happened was Asumina treating not only him badly, but also the entire group in the workshop. Desperate with this, Asumina runs off saying she has no idea what's being talked about. But Aura questions whether the girl doesn't think the conversation now is more important than the urgent issue she has to resolve. And at the moment a panel opens, Asumina becomes even more desperate, because inside it is the master of the crafting guild named Gandalf on a live call. Having heard what the girl did because of the journalist, Gandalf appears to be quite irritated. And despite Asumina trying to explain herself, the boss says he was foolish to let her act freely. Anyway, angrier than ever, he orders the girl to come to the guild immediately, scaring her to her limit. So Aura thinks they really shouldn't have messed with our hero. After all, the best thing for her is that the protagonist achievements aren't disturbed by anyone. Back with our hero, Iam receives equipment from the workshop blacksmiths as a reward, and the two wait for Ashes. By the way, Taiyu had told the hero to visit his guild, which was located in the third city. And Ryu was already fine with traveling, but he understands it might be dangerous for his servant because of her level. So a great idea comes after a long time away to fix this. They all go to the dry desert. Defeating monsters in this place is the best method to level up, and when asked, Iam says she can handle it quickly. A horde of goblins just like the one the protagonist faced in the beginning appears. And with everything ready, he tells his servant to finish them all off. At high speed, the girl quickly defeats one of the monsters and continues to take down the others. Then the hero realizes that even though he was worried about her level, she was stronger than normal. However, the biggest problem now was something else, and that became clear when after another strike, a sense of danger made the girl leap away. Because of the presence of the monster boss called the Goblin General, this one is indeed tough, and its strength means any attack could be fatal. So now the question is whether she will be able to defeat it. Right from the first strike, Iam dodges and then our hero shouts for her to try a counter-attack. But when that happens, unexpectedly, the attack seems to hit the monster like a gentle touch, which the hero doesn't understand. It seems the girl is just touching the monster instead of attacking it. So our hero watches all of this with great curiosity, wanting to know what Iam is planning. Using her speed to her advantage, the girl continues to touch the monster, and the hero still doesn't understand. It seems like she's waiting for a chance, but the reason for the touches still isn't clear. Besides, little by little, Iam starts getting tired, so our hero becomes very worried. But he understands that he can't help since this is her training. Therefore, Ryu accepts staying still to just watch his servant's performance because deep down he believes in her. During the fight, for a moment, the girl's speed falters and the goblin boss manages to hit her, causing a major injury and sending her flying. Ryu panics and at the same moment, the monster prepares to deliver the final blow. So, obviously, the hero summons his scepter to save her, but then he decides to stop after noticing something. That's because even though it seems to have the upper hand, a monster can't move. And that was exactly the girl's plan. She managed to stop the monster's movements with dozens of energy chains. Then a system notification appears saying that Iam activated her charm skill, which can stop enemy movement upon touch. Since it's based on probability, Iam had been waiting for a chance all this time, making several touches. And now that the opponent can't move anymore, the fight is decided, because the girl rushes in to deliver her mana punch, completely shattering the enemy and making many rewards appear for Ryu. On the night of that same day, suddenly a strong wind blows through the low grass. That's because Ryu is running with I am in search of midnight monsters, which are stronger. At a certain moment, something starts rising from the ground, and one after another, several zombies appear. In this way, the hero gets excited to see what kind of monsters he'll face. And since I am is stronger, there's no need to worry about her. So for now, you can let go of any concerns to defeat these bastards. Alongside his servant, the protagonist defeats one after another with great ease. Then extremely euphoric, he shouts that this game never disappoints. Until shortly after the small fry are defeated, the largest of the undead appears. This is the boss of the midnight pasture called the Phantom Knight. Due to the protagonist's personality, instead of being frightened, he feels satisfied with the challenge. And without wasting time, the two charge at the monster to finish it off. While dodging some projectiles, I strikes the monster in the chest, and then the two join forces for a final blow, which pierces through the Phantom Knight, making it explode into several pieces, leaving only a trace on the ground. Thus, Ryu laughs a lot because with a performance like that, he believes it's impossible to lose. After defeating that whole horde of monsters, the protagonist comments that fighting at night is really fun. And at the end of the grassy field, they finally arrive at the third city called Tresvile. All the details show that it's a wonderful city, like a true tourist spot. And besides that, the meeting point is this fountain that looks a lot like a Roman fountain. Since they are still an hour before meeting Taiyu, the protagonist says they'll take a walk around the city. So the two have a lot of fun eating, dancing, and also playing with some sculptures. However, the last one stirred the girls' protective instinct, and they ended up causing some trouble. Anyway, in this city, there's even a kind of Roman arena. And being quite dazzled, the protagonist comments that he loved to have a battle in a place like that. But that was exactly what another person who now appears the protagonist was thinking. Naturally, Ryu asks who this person is, so the man introduces himself as Yamato, apologizing for the rudeness. And also says he came to meet Ryu, making the hero laugh a lot. But it wasn't a mocking laugh, it was a happy one, because he was dealing with a decent person instead of an enemy. And given the impact of Aura's video, the boy can understand the hero's perspective. Anyway, the protagonist gets back to the point asking what Yamato wants with him. And about that, the guy gets excited to say it right away, because what he wants is a duel against Ryu. The city of Tresvile is the place where you can challenge another player to a duel. And based on the previous statement, the protagonist enjoys fighting just as much as he does. To be honest, Yamato was so excited after watching that video that he wondered what would happen if he fought the hero. But the guy also makes it clear that it's only if Ryu has some free time, which the protagonist just by his expression already shows that he's going to accept. For him, this will be a battle between brothers that will strengthen a friendship with a good person. Therefore, Ryu thinks it's a great idea, and Yamato also gets pumped to start immediately. Heading into the arena, the two greet each other for a fair fight. While both sides take 20 steps apart, Haya watches bored from the stands. Ryu is really excited to see what kind of skill his opponent will use, and the same applies to Yamato. But his expression doesn't seem so friendly, because what he really wants is to take out his anger on the boy. In Yamato's view, after Ryu became famous, he started flirting with Io and Ashes at the same time. So the guy became furious with jealousy and declared the hero his mortal enemy. However, there's no point in defeating him using dishonest methods. And that's precisely why Yamato chose to crush the protagonist honestly in a one-on-one. After that, with Aura's report, all the girls in Theo will hear about it. And with Yamato's victory, he will finally be known as the coolest and most handsome player. Without further delay, the signal to begin the fight is given with both already prepared. Then the warriors charge to the center of the arena, and Yamato prepares to strike first. And since the hero sees the blow coming slowly, he decides to counter his weapon. But for some reason, his strike doesn't hit the target, and Yamato manages to land a hit on Ryu's face, marking his first blow to the hero's surprise. Unexpectedly, the attack from behind was a bluff because the guy knew the protagonist was planning a counterattack. And mocking him, asking if that's all Ryu's got, Yamato tells him to show more of the power he used to defeat the Crimson Wolf. Until now, the protagonist has faced many people, but this one is completely different from the others because he's using his brain to win. So the hero understands that this is a real duel, and since Yamato is strong, it will be against a true player. Suddenly, something catches the protagonist's attention in the stands. Ayam is trembling with fear that something bad might happen to her master. Therefore, realizing her concern, the protagonist starts to regain control of his mind. And he calls out to Yamato to explain about his request to see the power that defeated the boss. Our hero apologizes because something like that will be impossible. However, not because he doesn't want to, but because his power has far surpassed the power from that time. In this case, Yamato gets a little worried but questions what the hero will do since he has been preparing for this for a long time. So the boy yells asking how Ryu will regain the advantage. But instead of speaking, the hero decides to show by advancing quickly and getting faster and faster. He then summons his second club, making it clear to Yamato that he is also a dual weapon user. However, even with two weapons, Yamato believes he can counter-attack if the hero approaches in a predictable way. But the protagonist was already counting on that and on his speed being underestimated. He only revealed it at the last moment, starting to circle the warrior at high speed. In the past, the Crimson Wolf couldn't keep up because of its huge body. But when it comes to a player, it's different. Because now the hero can use his speed to confuse the enemy's reactions. But even with this strategy, Yamato manages to sense the moment of the attack and escape. However, the boy was very scared by how close it was, and Ryu was very shocked by his unbelievable reflex. Therefore, in their own way, each one thought of the other as a monster. Back to the duel, both try to land a strike on each other multiple times. And by not stopping at any moment, Yamato manages to position himself behind the hero to finish the battle. So with his final move, he activates the Twin Dragon's Fangs. But suddenly, the protagonist's club is launched at his chest, catching fire and making him lose all concentration. Taking advantage of that, it's now Ryu who gets behind and hits his opponent. The hero was able to predict the attack from behind as if he already knew what was going to happen. So Yamato started thinking of an answer to that. But the protagonist himself decides to clarify, saying he left an opening in his back on purpose. With nothing else to say, Ryu prepares his final move, Energy Break, jumping on top of the warrior. With nothing else to do, he simply watches his defeat as the blow hits him, bringing Yamato's HP to 0, making Ryu the true champion. With the end of the fight, the protagonist comments that the battle was very exhausting. Yamato, in turn, starts getting up laughing as he admits his defeat as well as the hero's superior strength. Because of that, Ryu also acknowledges his opponent for being the first to react to his counterattack that way. Therefore, the protagonist extends his hand sincerely thanking him for the fun, which leaves the warrior very surprised. Sujimata recalls that games are really meant for people to have fun and reflects that he was being a fool. Ashamed of his actions, he also extends his hand believing he should be more like the hero. That's when Elle appears saying they are already late for the meeting with the guild, making the protagonist apologize. And since the hero always loses track of time when he gets into different things, she calls him over right away. Besides that, right in front of Yamato, our hero asks the girl not to keep hugging his arm. Then the boy can't hold back his feelings anymore and yells that he will destroy the protagonist one day, leaving Ryu startled by his friend's attitude. Anyway, Yamato runs off, shouting all kinds of names at the protagonist. Definitely something Ryu didn't expect from someone he thought was so upright and honest. So Elle pulled the protagonist to the meeting while Ryu couldn't stop crying about what happened. But the girl didn't care much since he would make other friends in the guild. Although as a solo player, the protagonist definitely doesn't like the idea of joining a guild. Later, Taiyuan or Apollo introduces Ryu to all the members, asking them to be welcoming. Then the hero raises his hand to greet them, but the members seem quite intimidating. To Ryu, there's no mutual understanding there because everyone is judging him. And so what he wants most now is to go back home. Suddenly, someone appears to greet the hero first. Apologizing for the other's reception, Rose introduces herself as a magic swordswoman. With that, our hero is happy to meet someone who seems decent there. But another person appears, cutting off their conversation to introduce herself too. Introducing herself as the gladiator, Saria. She says it's a pleasure to meet the hero. Apparently, the two have a very good relationship because they started fighting, threatening to attack each other right then and there. Because of that, the protagonist gets a little worried about the fact that they are fighting during introductions. Taiyu, on the other hand, already expected it would end up like that, so he decided to finish the introductions. Among the members, there is Konoha, who is an acrobat and despite being absent-minded is quite kind. Next is Harry, a serious person who shares the same class as the hero. Besides them, Mao is a magic specialist who seems quite surprised to see Ryu. And the rest of the members are Rejo, Plax, as well as Fugaku and Kale. And since Taiyu passed over them without much detail, they all get irritated. Anyway, Apollo had said there were 4 people, but one is not there. However, to answer that, the missing member himself announces that he won't accept this. That man leaning against the wall is the remaining member named Rejo. Taiyu asks what his subordinate means by not accept. And being very clear, Rejo says he is against inviting the hero to the guild. To explain himself with a question, the boy recalls the master's goal of making this guild the strongest in Theo. However, the fact is that Ryu is still at level 36 and his class isn't even that good. Because of that, to Rejo, the protagonist is a rookie who doesn't deserve to be among them. After hearing all that judgment in silence, the hero asks to pose a question, and not unexpectedly. What he wants to know is what a high-level job is, which makes his friends quite embarrassed for not having explained it yet. It said that high-level jobs are the ones that can be obtained after changing classes in the 4th city and are only possible once the level is above 50. Once that happens, abilities and spells are enhanced, allowing stronger skills to be learned. In short, it's the proof that a player is high level and the rule they established for someone to enter the guild. Therefore, Rega makes it clear that the hero shouldn't get excited just because he defeated the Crimson Wolf once, especially since for him, the rumor that it's very hard to defeat that monster alone must be a mistake. Unable to tolerate that arrogant attitude anymore, O intervenes in the conversation and orders him to apologize, saying she won't allow any insults to Ryu. In this case, Reggio gets even more fired up and yells that he's just complaining because he doesn't want the guild to be weakened. That's why, since only facts have been stated so far, the boy asks if Io has a problem with that. And even though she holds a higher rank, she falls silent, knowing she can't refute him. In the first place, the protagonist doesn't even need to join the guild, but until now, he'd been wondering why he's being invited despite the rule. So inevitably, he remembered how excited O was to play together when he was gifted the game. That makes Ryu understand that he can no longer ignore his companion's feelings. Back in the conversation, our hero comments that he agrees with Reigo on some points, which makes the boy excited about being understood. But understanding that he just needs a high-quality class, Ryu is willing to go after it. And if that's the case, all the other members agree that there will be no problem with him joining. Reggio, however, comments that something simple like that can be done by anyone. But if the intention is to show power, the hero must get a high-level job, and the time for that is just 1 week so that Reggio can consider accepting him. Obviously, everyone is shocked by such a short deadline since just leveling from 30 to 40 takes 2 whole months. Still, Reggio asks if the protagonist agrees because if he joins now, it will ruin the value of the guild. And besides that, claiming there's no reason to get along, the boy states he will leave if Ryu completes the mission. Taiyu yells already fed up with everything, especially because there's no reason for his colleague to quit. But the hero ignores the scolding and states clearly that the next time they meet will be in the 4th city where he will change jobs, leaving everyone speechless. But Reggio more anxious than ever, and now that the protagonist has committed as a man, he shouldn't go back on his word. As he leaves the guild, the hero seems quite determined, but only until he confesses that he doesn't know how to level up. The fact is, after defeating the Crimson Wolf, his level didn't increase much, but he believes it won't be difficult. That boss is an event that happens once a month, and even if you defeat it, you won't be able to turn the situation in your favor. So in the middle of that tight spot, someone appears to the hero, offering some advice. And in case he really needs it, this girl, who claims to be a genius and beautiful, says she'll help. However, what she offers to lend is something so intimate, it's not even worth mentioning. In this case, the hero asks if she meant the expression lend a hand. Either way, during that introduction, he felt something strange. Because of that shy way of speaking, it became clear to our hero that this was his junior Sakazaki. In this case, very embarrassed. The girl asks what he means by that. Besides, she also asks why the hero provoked Reggio to that extent. They were all together in the school club, but the girl thought the hero was the type who wouldn't fall for provocations. Sincerely, Ryu explains that he's doing it for Io because once his level increases, they'll be able to play together. But even getting emotional with the hero's empathy, this won't be an easy task. And even if he doesn't want to admit it, he concedes that Mao is right on some points. Still, the girl makes herself available to help in any case, and she says she will definitely give the hero the salvation to his problems like a true messiah. Back in the real world, the protagonist can hardly believe how much he's struggling. That's because in the game, he was able to collect all the rare items with ease using his character. But here he is chasing a limited edition pudding with someone desperate. Sometime later in a park in the city, our hero manages to get it, but is extremely worn out. Then within seconds, Mao appears, praising the good job, but also commenting that the boy looks a little sick. To answer the reason, Ryu angrily asks who she thinks is to blame. Mao, in turn, thinks it's obvious it was the boy who provoked Reggio. In changing the subject, she asks about the pudding. Then the hero says it's the price for the help she's going to give, which makes Mao very happy. Without waiting any longer, she decides to eat the limited edition pudding right away, and on the first spoonful, realizes how delicious it is, saying it might even be the happiest moment of her entire life, which naturally, the hero finds to be an exaggeration. Changing the subject, he comments that he didn't expect his junior to also play Theo. And about that, the girl apologizes for not stopping Reggio from starting a fight. She really thought the two would resolve things peacefully and in the end, couldn't do anything. But just that confession is enough for our hero. So he asks why she's apologizing since they know each other so well, and asks if that's why she's helping him, then thanks her for everything she's done. Definitely, those compliments hit the girl deeply, but she tries to maintain her composure, saying it's her duty as a junior. Ryu had always been attentive to Mao, and one day, even though she never told anyone about an injury on her heel, while trying to keep going despite the pain, feeling bad about stopping training, Ryu appeared, asking if her feet were okay for running. Moreover, our hero was the only one who offered help, showing up with a bandage. Therefore, those actions from the protagonist, that side of him, were definitely something Mao loved deeply. And that's why she will support him in any situation, even without saying it outright. Back to the conversation, the hero comments that simply defeating normal monsters won't be efficient for leveling up. So, Mao agrees that going to already visited places won't bring good results if they want to increase his level. Therefore, the best place to go is the Dragon's Valley, which is exactly where they are headed now. Later, inside the game, a horde of dragons is seen in the sky amid a ravine. And the worst part is that they carry weapons and armor, making them even more dangerous. In front of Ryu and more than 10 of them come to attack, and the hero comments that the number is a bit unpleasant. Mao explains that the reason this place is the best for leveling up is because of the high encounter rate. In another place, it would take 1 hour to level up, but this place shortens the process to just 45 minutes. However, not everything is smooth because suddenly the protagonist's instinct is triggered by a charging dragon. So right after dodging, he tries to counter-attack with a strike from his club, but not only does he miss, the dragons work together. Then from above, another one appears from behind to attack our hero, sending him flying with a blow. That's the downside of this place because the hero will have to face them in these numbers, fighting continuously without being able to stop. Even though he doesn't want to admit it, the protagonist understands that he's in a complicated situation. Both and he are confident in their firepower and speed, and Ryu thought he'd be fine as long as he dodged them. But he didn't expect to take so much damage because even alone doesn't have the resistance to withstand the dragon's impact. Ryu didn't know what to do, but it was at that moment that he got a call from Ashes. And, fortunately, on the other end of the line was good news from his friend because she had finally finished the hero's armor. In this case, Ashes asks when the hero will come pick it up because she'll be there for a while. And before she even finishes speaking, the hero yells that he's going right now, which though worries the girl, she accepts. Ryu informs Mao that he's returning to Juval, much to her surprise. Obviously, Mao asks if the protagonist is no longer interested in leveling up. But Tahiro makes it clear that he has a priority to deal with first, so taking Mayan's hand, he runs off happily, saying that Ash's equipment is finally ready, hopping from stone to stone like a child, which leaves Mao with mixed feelings since the hero's speed leaving was faster than when he was fighting. Later in the city of Juval, the blacksmith continues waiting for the hero's arrival until he finally shows up, practically bursting through the door. Even though he arrived a bit late in the hero's view, the girl thinks it's amazing that he came immediately. And right behind him came Mao, completely exhausted from running so much to keep up. But upon arriving, what she sees is Ryu saying he's happy to see Ashes after such a long time, which obviously makes the girl extremely jealous, wanting to know who this person is. Then the hero explains that she's the creator who made AIM's equipment, and also introduces Mao to the creator. However, Ashes doesn't like at all that Ryu is friends with the girl. Although feeling the same way, Mao greets her rival by saying she's the hero's junior to make the other jealous. Then Ashes replies by saying that she's always traveling with the hero everywhere inside Theo because they never leave each other's side. And it's with that warm reception that the two greet each other. Even the hero realizes there seems to be a hostile atmosphere between the two. But even dying of anger, they try to keep their composure in front of Ryu, which leaves the hero a little disappointed since he wanted the two to become friends. Changing the subject, the protagonist asks to see his armor right away, and Ashes agrees immediately, saying it's a product made exclusively for the hero and 5 minutes later, Ashes appears with the armor and asks what our hero thinks. For it was a typical traditional Japanese outfit, which obviously looked very good. And without even seeing the effects, our hero already loves it because looked really cute in it. Ashes informs that it's very durable due to the boss's materials and that was specifically designed not to limit movement, which the hero finds amazing. Anyway, the protagonist calls Ashes over to praise how good the equipment turned out, thanking her very much for the girl's help. So the two share a nice moment together where Ashes also thanks him for allowing her to use the Crimson Wolf's materials while Mao stands aside, burning with rage. Therefore, with nothing more to do there, the junior pulls the hero to return quickly to the Dragon's Valley, leaving both the servant and the creator in the workshop not understanding anything. Later, back on the battlefield, IAM is ready to fight with her new armor. Then the hero asks her to show the power of the newest equipment she received from Ashes. In a quick dash, one of the dragons tries to intercept the girl's advance, but she manages to defend herself with her bare hands. Surprised that not even a scratch was made on the outfit. Therefore, even the hero's impressed because it's just like Ashes said when she warned it was tougher than it looked. Thanks to the armor's durability, Iron remains completely fine after several powerful attacks, being totally different from before. That's why even though she doesn't like Ashes, the hero's junior admits that she's very talented. Anyway, VRMMMO keeps humiliating the dragons, and so a smirk appears along with a thank you from the hero. That's because now that he can move without worrying about his rear, Ryu definitely won't lose. And since he's being helped so much, he believes he should at least show off a new skill. Back at the guild, Elf feels very overwhelmed because of her, the protagonist is having a bad experience. To console her, Apollo says it's not her fault, especially since we are talking about our hero who could very well be taking advantage of the situation. And from afar, Rego listens to the whole conversation with an irritated but also curious expression. Back on the battlefield, Iron continues destroying the dragons one after another. Before changing her armor, they had to think carefully about how to defend during battle. But as long as it has this durability, the hero doesn't need to worry anymore. Especially now, he can also use this mission to level up calmly. But to Mao, this looks more like the face of a demon killer than someone grinding to level up. Anyway, now Ryu comments that it's time to use his new skill. Suddenly, a magic circle appears on the ground, surprising his junior. And with that, several icy swords begin to be summoned through a magic circle. This is the sword of conviction that has just been activated, leaving Mao in disbelief since she's never seen such a skill. While the sword of faith converts MP into attack power, the sword of conviction converts the hero's mana into 10 flying swords. That's why he yells that this fight will be easy and starts attacking by launching one sword at each monster. And each of them, upon encountering a dragon, manages to cut it in half, leaving Mao frightened. One by one, the lizard men are falling to this firepower, which makes the girl wonder if the protagonist was really supposed to be a priest. Anyway, at a certain point, the hero's back is exposed for a sneak attack. Then one of the dragons tries to attack using its maximum power, but fails because since there was a sword of conviction, there was also a shield. This is the shield of conviction, which is the protective version of the sword of conviction. Additionally, the protagonist can also stand on the shield to fly through the air, making him basically the Aladdin of the MORP world. Mao can barely believe what her eyes are seeing, and as long as there's a hole in the system, the protagonist claims he'll keep doing things like this. Moreover, he also summons his scepter to merge both powers, and jumping off the shield, he uses the height advantage in his favor to pile all monsters together and crush them to the ground with an extremely powerful attack. Thus, 5 lizard men were hit by the hero's firepower at the same time. And unfortunately for them, the protagonist still has more bad news because the one most capable of fighting in the air is actually Ayan. Because of that, the girl jumps onto one of the shields while our hero works as support. And so, leaping from one to another at high speed, she defeats every monster that appears, propelling herself more and more. Mao is left jaw-dropped by this strategy of using the shields as platforms because it's something no one has ever done. So for her, it becomes more than clear that the protagonist is truly the real genius of Theo. At this moment, Ryu is at level 43, which shows that this is a good place to level up. But he has an idea for an even better place and believes it's worth testing this method because if it works, his gains will increase a lot. After defeating most of those monsters, a protagonist makes a sinister expression as he thinks of something interesting. Then he tells Mao that he needs to ask a favor. Ryu asks her to check if there are other players in the area and to move them out of the crossfire if there are. Mao says she can do that, but asks what the reason is. Then the hero says that if everything goes according to plan, it'll be better to wait and witness the main event, which obviously irritates the girl. But instead of insisting, she just asks Ryu to hurry. Now that the first stage is complete, the hero says Ayan will play an important role in it. The hero wants her to lure all the lizard men in the valley to his position, but without attacking them. And when he asks if she can do that, the servant makes herself fully available, already running off without looking back. Ryu, in turn, comments that it's hard to say that to such a cute girl like her. But since her defense increased a lot with the new equipment, the hero believes there won't be a problem. And more than anything, he trusts that his servant will be able to handle it well. While she's running, suddenly, one of the monsters notices Ayan, so the girl starts running in the opposite direction. Obviously, the lizard men try to attack the girl, but she dodges easily and keeps running, attracting more and more monsters to chase her. Meanwhile, at the designated spot, Mao announces that there's no one else around, and she soon gets startled by an approaching sound. But that's due to an entire horde of lizard men coming that way because of Ayan. And something like this is exactly what the protagonist wants, so he thanks the servant for the good work and summons his club because now it's time to continue with the main event. With his weapon, the protagonist lifts it and slams it into the ground, creating a hole that sends multiple rocks flying toward the path of the monsters in the air. So unexpectedly, they start getting hit and defeated by them, which Mao really can't believe. Thus, with this strategy, the entire horde is completely wiped out with ease. And since it worked, the hero brags a lot, calling himself a lizard fisherman. Even if his expression is pathetic, Mao admits that luring them to one spot was an effective method. While Im distracts the monsters, the protagonist defeats them, and afterward, they respawn in large numbers. Therefore, this is a perfect infinite cycle that to the hero is worthy of a Nobel Prize, and to Mao, maybe even a little unfair to the monsters considering how much Ryu is enjoying himself. In the end, the boy sweats a lot, but now he's no longer gaining as much experience as before. So the hero asks if there's some kind of boss around, and Mao replies, yes, saying it's located in the deepest part of the valley. However, he didn't need to go that far because suddenly a huge gust of wind begins to make the player stagger. And as time passes, it only grows stronger because the wind marks the appearance of the area's boss. Obviously, worried, Mao asks why the monster is here. But the fact is that the boss of the region is right there in the flesh. Then the protagonist comments that this is exactly what you'd expect from a boss in a game. And showing all its fury, this giant red dragon roars, putting tremendous pressure on the battlefield. From a cloud of smoke that appeared with its landing, the monster's body is fully revealed, and following its instincts, it roars again. Mao still can't understand why it's there, and apparently, this is truly the boss of the deep region. Normally, this boss appears around the outskirts, a bit far from the area, so it should be impossible for it to come here naturally. However, since the protagonist subdued a large number of smaller monsters, the boss came to avenge them, which was the best-case scenario for Ryu. Especially, because once he defeats this guy, his leveling process will increase significantly. Before they can attack, the monster takes flight, stirring up a powerful gust of wind. And without a second thought, the first attack of a fire dragon is to unleash a massive fire blast from its mouth. Therefore, even the hero gets excited because this is what a dragon is supposed to do. In response to the attack, Yu summons a shield of conviction for himself and for his servant. And because she was in the fire's range, Mao has to run on her own fighting for her life. So she yells at the hero to make sure the attacks don't come down on her again. Back in the battle, a monster starts releasing more fire from its mouth, but this time, the form of projectiles. Therefore, the protagonist becomes desperate with a ridiculously short delay between attacks. But even though it's hard, he keeps dodging, and upon realizing that this is just a regular attack, the boy's concern skyrockets. Mal explains that this is a boss meant to be defeated by at least 4 people. So realizing that being cautious won't help, Hero summons his sword of conviction to take out the monster's vision first. However, before the attacks land, the monster tightens its guard and spreads its wings at the last second, sending the swords flying with the strong wind. With that, Ryu realizes the dragon has a real advantage in aerial combat. But once the hero manages to drag it down to the ground, he'll be able to land a decisive blow. While thinking of strategies, suddenly the protagonist laughs mischievously, remembering something that might work. So he begins preparing, and right as he finishes, decides to start the show. Once again, the protagonist uses the sword of conviction to attack, so Mao thinks the hero should already know that something like this won't work. What really happens is that the dragon deflects all the swords. However, that was exactly where our hero wanted because now he can use his skill release. Suddenly, a giant kunai is driven into the ground, and with it, several chains fly over the monster. Until naturally, they start wrapping around his body, and as more anchors lock into the ground, the boss is completely immobilized. Ryu can barely celebrate how happy he is with this success. Release is a skill that unleashes the property of a magical ability. So the protagonist used the sword of conviction to transform it into a chain with the magic bind. From the beginning, the hero was planning to restrain it since the dragon always dodged his attacks, so Ryu disguised the ability as the sword of conviction. Anyway, Ryu knows the dragon won't stay restrained for long, but as long as it remains still for at least 30 seconds, it's game over for it. Mounted on shields, Im quickly begins attacking the monster without any mercy, and Ryu does the same but with even more enthusiasm, obliterating the dragon without giving it any chance to fight back. With this victory, the protagonist comments that the job was long but came at the right time, and thus he levels up several times. Finally, the protagonist reaches level 49 after being stuck for a while, and now he only needs one more level. After that, he just has to go to the 4th city called Yuvil. For everything so far, the protagonist thanks Mao for her help, saying she has his gratitude. Back in the Dragon Valley after all those battles, the landscape has changed significantly. The next day, birds are singing, but the protagonist is extremely irritated. That's because Mao forgot to mention a very important detail. She forgot to say that the field they need to cross to get to Caboville is actually very large, and because of that, it will take 2 days to reach the city. In this case, the hero asks what they'll do if the leveling process is slow there, and Mao replies that they should just forget about that because there are cases where people manage to reach the city in less than 10 hours. So the hero thinks a bit about it because even just 10 hours is already inconvenient until he has the idea to check the system since he learned a new magic skill after leveling up. Among them is the Great Gliding Eagle and the Earth Dragon, which can be summoned just like Aeon. So the hero decides to test it by summoning the Earth Dragon first, and quickly, the monster materializes from a magic circle summoned on the ground to everyone's surprise. Being a dinosaur creates a dual reaction between Ryu, who loves it, and Mao, who hates it. Then the protagonist asks the reason for a reaction, and the girl answers that she simply doesn't like reptiles. In this case, the hero comments that she doesn't have to come along. She insists that she will. After all, if she gets on that dinosaur, they'll have a chance to be very close to each other. So mounted on the Earth Dragon, the hero hopes it has at least the speed of a car. But right when the monster starts running, his expectations are met and even surpassed as it's far too fast. It's definitely more like a bullet train than a car. Then the hero enjoys the moment until Mal calls his attention, warning him about a huge crater just ahead. And since the Earth Dragon can't stop in time, they all fall into that hole. For Mal, this experience was so horrible that it can be compared to a roller coaster. By the way, the crater is only visible from the sky, but just as he thinks about that, the hero notices there's a massive tree near where they are. Suddenly, that vegetation, giant red dragon, even bigger than the tree, appears roaring. Then Mao explains that this is the most powerful dragon, which was defeated by top-ranking players. Naturally, the hero assumes that this was the dragon responsible for that giant crater. However, the girl denies that idea, stating that if it were, the crater wouldn't look like this. In that case, Ai becomes curious to know which monster made it, if not that one, until he realizes something that was obvious, but he hadn't noticed. This whole time, although it looked like a crater, they were actually just standing inside a footprint of the dragon. This is the ruler of this field, and it's exactly the one standing in the path to Cleric. And so step by step, the giant monster they've been talking about begins to approach until it stops right in front of the group. Now to move forward to Cleric, our hero will have to face the boss known as Giant.